It's funny, isn't it? But often the things we say to our kids are just, we say them without thinking about them. And they're good things of sorts. Hey, let's keep trying hard. Make sure you go out there. How are we going to win this game? Whatever else it might be. But sometimes it is all about achievement and productivity. Actually, our world is really driven like that in our Western culture. That's what it's all about. How can we achieve things? All right, well, if you want to do well at that sport, how do we get up a bit earlier? If you want to do well at that grades, how do we get a tutor? And all of these things, none of them are actually wrong. But we sort of seem to live in this life that we've got to achieve, otherwise we're sort of not worthwhile. Where does our worth and our achievement, and how do these mix? Could we possibly be having an addiction to achievement? Could it be choosing us rather than us choosing it? That's what my guest today, author Justine Toh, is going to be talking about. In fact, she's written a book called Achievement Addiction, and we're going to get stuck into this today. If you love this podcast, please rate, review, share it, give it 5 stars, follow it. All of those things help the algorithms get out to more people. It's always free. We just love getting out to as many people as we can and help them head towards a better understanding in their life as well. All right, let's get on with this conversation that I had with Justine. Justine, thanks so much for your time.
Great to be here. Thanks, Clayton.
Firstly, despite the fact that half of the book pretty much has a go at one of my favourite TV shows of all time, I will look past that, Justine. And
That's good of you.
But to be fair, we might get onto that. Even though you do have a go, I agree with the exact sentiments that you put in this book about that show, so we're still on fine. Let's talk about this firstly. Achievement addiction. It does feel like this is a small book, but a book that you're putting out there, which is almost like saying to the world, everything you know is wrong, because it does feel like in our culture in Australia and New Zealand that achievement is the highest aim that is put on almost all of society. For you, before we even get stuck into what is achievement, what is the addiction, what are those things put together, why did you think, well, this is something I should write, this is a book I should write?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose my own personal story comes into it. I am the child of Chinese immigrants, and my parents, well, they say that they weren't really strict tiger parents, but it didn't feel like that growing up. I felt them to be quite strict in insisting on achievement and doing well and being the best and all the rest of that. And it just really, I suppose in Sydney, where I'm coming from, sometimes the chat around what like Asian students are like, what Asian parents are like, can feel a little bit like, oh, they're very obsessed with achievement. That's what it can sort of feel like, picking up on that kind of conversation. And I suppose my experience was like, well, sure, these guys are in some ways the SWAT team of achievement addicts, right? They're really insisting and very overt about being kind of elite achievers. But then doesn't that let everyone else off the hook? When I see there's plenty of people around me who are not Asian immigrants who are toiling very hard, and not just for results, but for their worth, really. And so I think this is a widespread problem. And honestly, given that house prices, for example, are so exorbitant, it's kind of like you do have to work yourself to death in order to be able to be in a position to afford something as well. So there's something about the system that we're in as well, and the economy, that is kind of pushing us to achieve in various ways as well. So it's not just the preserve of one particular ethnic group, but it's something that all of us have a stake in.
I do like how you build the argument as you go through the book too, exactly on that case, starting with your own personal perspective, and then even talking about, well, if we are saying, well, Asian parents might be like this, and we can sort of say, well, that's a stereotype, but it's probably there for a reason, and then sort of compare that to other people in sports with their kids and how they push them, or the need in work to sort of always be achieving in different aspects. And I know you sort of slowly layer and layer and layer until it's sort of a fact of, well, yeah, you're right, we're all sort of sucked into this achievement mentality. Where do you think that has actually come from? Like, where did that start? Is there a part of our Australian or New Zealand history where we sort of went, well, this is when this sort of commenced, or has it always been there for since, I suppose, white settlement?
I don't. I'm not sure if there's a particular point in Australian history. I just think it's part of the kind of Western system that we're part of. Because as far as I can remember, I think like a lot of those elite universities, like the Ivy League, let's say today, a lot of those universities used to just educate the kind of the children of the privileged, right? So it wasn't about you need to reach a certain academic level in order to be admitted to this elite institution. If you have connections, if your father is a wealthy donor to our university and he went here, then you would naturally go here as well. But then I can't remember the exact detail, but at some point in that history, it was about actually no. Let's make it more widespread. We're going to make the basis of admission to the university system more meritocratic, right, on the basis of individual merit. And of course, like that wasn't like a straight kind of merit thing. There was still aspects of if you were from particular disfavored ethnicities, you would be like you would be underprivileged in that sense, and you wouldn't be granted special treatment. But generally, there was a sense that, your marks should be getting you into this place. And I think we just live in the wash of that. And to some degree, it makes a lot of sense, right? You want the best person to be in the job that they're qualified for. You don't want to just give jobs to people just because they have connections. But then the trick, I suppose, is that even though we want the best people in the jobs, we're now in an educational system, especially that tends to zero in on the numbers, right? the grades as the defining marker of success. And I just think that we need a richer way to name that and call it out, because it's very easy to start thinking that the number that all our young people are striving for, like the ATAR, is the be all and end all. And it's not just a measure of their speed or their accuracy or how well they've been drilled to like achieve in this particular way. You can think that number is supposed to be some sort of measure of who you are as a person. And I just thought that's not okay. Like I know what it's like to feel the pressure of that number sums up everything about you. But it's such a thinned out kind of like really reductive vision of what it means to be human. I think like there's no number that we think that we should measure someone's kindness, right? Or their patience, these are the sorts of virtues that actually make you worth knowing in the long run, not how clever you are at, I don't know, maths or something, So I just wanted to call that out and kind of say, let's achieve, but let's make sure that we're having a richer conversation about it.
You sort of go on to make that argument in other spaces as well, right? Like the schooling system is sort of an obvious example when you actually step back and look at it as you've described, but that also happens in the workplace, right? It's, well, how much are you earning? Or what is the title that you have? These are those same ideas that we are sort of following to say, well, this is a person of importance because of something or whatever else it might be, that it doesn't stop when we get to the end of school.
No. In fact, the first question you might ask someone when you meet them, sometimes even before their name, is, what do you do for a living? And it's because we've moved to this era where we're not really so much thinking about our inherited identities, right? Like the family that you might be from or the country or the area you grew up in, all that sort of stuff. But we're thinking more about our achieved identities. What have you done for yourself? And how do and somehow we think that achieved identity helps to plot that person on some kind of social scale of significance. And I mean, that sounds really kind of abstract, but what it really means is, let me just try and get a handle of you. And if I know what you do for a living, that will give me a keen sense of who you are. And in some ways, it'll also tell me how important you are, how if it might be advantageous to get to know you as well. So, I mean, I felt this when I was for a time a stay-at-home mum. And, like if you were in a social situation and it's like, oh, I'm at home with the kids right now. And then sometimes it would be subtle, but sometimes you could see people's eyes kind of glaze over slightly. Oh, this is a nobody that I'm speaking to. Not everyone's like this, of course, but it's just, and I don't hold it against any particular person for doing this, but it just shows how much we're all swept up in these cultural currents of what has significance and value and worth in our culture, and how we're just participating in that. And it does take a bit of energy and intention to kind of swim against the current of that. Yeah, but I certainly don't want people to like not feel valued just because they can't reach some sort of bar. You know, it's really destructive to just to value or not value someone based on something as random in some ways as achievement, right? Like, and I say that because, you know, several years ago there was this royal commission into the robo-debt scandal, right? When there was this kind of automated system that would chase people to pay off their Centrelink debts. And in some cases, there was no debt to pay off, right? The system was mistaken. But it was so destructive of people and to be accused of being like, you know, a quote unquote dole bludger, to be a quote unquote a drain on public funds. That, you know, some people, it got really bad for them and, you know, lives were lost. And one of the recommendations out of that Royal Commission was to really address narratives around quote unquote dole bludgers or quote unquote drains on public welfare, because that could be like the Royal Commissioners could note how destructive it was to have those sorts of labels applied to people. And so, as I said, we don't want anyone to kind of be pigeonholed in a particular way based on their achievement or the fact that they might fall on hard times or the fact that they might suffer some kind of illness or disability, which could happen to any one of us, right? And suddenly that becomes a blow to the things that we are able to achieve, the things we're able to do. Yeah.
You talk about it in a few different ways, and you've been mentioning that in the book. You talk about, you know, striving, suffering for achievement, smugness, which is where you did talk about the West Wing TV show, and this idea of what actually the media says to us as well, that each of these sort of areas are about achievement. Can we talk about, and maybe you'd want to bounce off a couple of those thoughts as well, but the idea of what actually achievement is getting for us or achieving for us. Is it actually about putting us on the top? Is that ultimately what you think this sort of achievement addiction is happening for us in Western society? That it is actually just about us making sure we're higher up than someone else, which feels like it's actually about pride. Is that what you think the aim is deep down, that we're all sort of following, or is there some other aim?
I feel that the deep need of every human is, this is true of me as well, we all need to feel valued. We all need to feel like we have worth and that that we belong, basically. And so achievement, things like getting a decent salary, being able to live in the house that you want, in the suburb that you want, like mixing with a certain social circle, these are all ways that we try and fill that spiritual need, right? To tell ourselves that we belong. But I think, but you're right, that pride is part of it as well, because if you're able to achieve the things that tell you that you belong, you're half basing that I belong based on the who is not here, who how can I distinguish myself from the other kinds of people out there? And I mean, it's interesting. Perhaps a better way to explain it is to think about this parable that Jesus once told. I don't mention this in the book, but there's this story where Jesus is talking about like two people coming before God to pray at the temple. There's like a tax collector who's kind of like a bit of a social outcast in that society. And then there's a Pharisee, the most upright kind of person you can imagine. He would be the achievement addict in this illustration. And the Pharisee / achievement addict comes before God to pray and says something like, I thank you that I am so good at what I do. I give charity to the poor. I do everything right. And I'm so glad that I'm not like this awful tax collector right here, who is the definite like loser in this situation. And then so in that sense, like, you know, his basis of his own self-worth is not only his, like, you know, what he's doing to belong, but the fact that he's not the despised outcast like the tax collector in that illustration. And I just think that really says a lot. It speaks to a human instinct, I suppose. And I think everyone can see this regardless of whether you're religious or not, that there is a desire to be better than that is deep within us. You know, I suppose the psychologists would say that's a survival mechanism as well, and that makes sense. But I also wonder whether, it's good for us to sometimes have our survival instincts challenged, right? So we are not just associating with the right kind of people, and not putting props on ourselves for being the right kind of people, because that means that we are going to be looking down on other people. So yeah, achievement is a tricky one. Like it's good and it's worthwhile for all the, reasonable reasons. You want to be able to earn a living, to provide for your family and so on. But then there's there's a bunch of spiritual pitfalls, and pride might be one of them, or smugness or superiority, those kind of traits that separate you from other people and increase the distance between you and other people, and really puts you in a position of superiority so you can look down on other people. So there's a lot of danger in achievement when it becomes an addiction like that.
We're going to be back in a couple of minutes' time as we continue having a chat with Justine Toh, part of the Reconsidering book series from the Centre for Public Christianity, Achievement Addiction. And we're going to talk about how do we do achievement without addiction? What is the antidote to this addiction mentality? How do we kick the habit? Justine's thoughts on that next here on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Justine, I think just as we do summarise, we're not saying achievement is bad, and you've already sort of mentioned that. That's not what we're trying to say, but any really addiction that is taking over who we are, alcohol, drug, achievement, actually is something we want to necessarily avoid, right? Like that means it's choosing us rather than us choosing it.
Yeah, that's right. So I suppose I'm looking at the compulsive nature of achievement, which I know is not typically classed as an addiction. Although I will observe that workaholism, I don't think we have a very rich conversation around that either, because obviously if you're a workaholic and you're so dedicated to your job, you might burn out, but, you'll make someone else rich in the meantime. So, maybe we're okay with that. And so, yeah, I would love us to all be a little bit more, now I want to say relaxed, but the former achievement addict in me is not happy with that word. But I suppose I want to put achievement in its place, right? In its right place. I don't want it to be a disordered love. I don't want it to be the thing that kind of runs my diary, runs the show of my life. I'd like to be able to think it has its place, like good, healthy striving has its place, but it's not the only thing that matters in life.
One of the things that I was like, oh, Justine, I want more. Where's the next chapter? As I got to the book was that you sort of talked about, you think the answer to achievement addiction is the grace that God gives us, and living in that grace. And then my next chapter was, well, how do I live that out? Or well, Justine. Mm-hmm. So maybe we could talk a bit about that. A lot of the times, and those who have, looked through the Bible, and whether it be sort of the Old Testament, the New Testament, we see this idea of, even a Sabbath, this idea of a rest, what it means that, to reflect what God did in terms of the creation and then rest, this idea that says actually there's something valuable in rest. And that does seem to be the opposite of what addiction, when it comes to achievement, is around as well, right? Like I can't possibly rest because then I'm not achieving something. I think you even used an example that, we now sort of say, well, let's not just catch up with a friend for coffee. Let's go and have a walk at the same time so we can knock off the exercise bit. Do you think rest is actually one of those antidotes, and how do we sort of get to that? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've got another idea.
Oh, no, you're completely right. Rest is such the answer, but I think it requires an entire book to explain what I mean by that, because it's not just simply stopping for the sake of, recharging, so you're able to then plunge back in come Monday, let's say. But it's about gaining perspective on the whole of life, right? To kind of step back from all the activity and to know in your bones that all the activity actually is for something. It's not just kind of like just okay, so I work hard so I can get to my holiday, and then I have my holiday, then I get back and then I work hard once again. The idea is that you're far more than the sum of your efforts. You're far more than the sum of your activities. But if you never really stop and take time, how will you know about it? And the thing that really drove this home for me was I read in a book, it's called This Sacred Life by the theologian Norman Wurzbach, who's also written about Sabbath as well. That in this particular book, This Sacred Life, he talks about how when an artist finishes their painting, say, they don't just like push it to the side and get stuck into the next painting, right? He says that they actually come into the presence of what they've done. And I love that actually, because it's like, you don't just rush away and don't look at it anymore. You actually take time to study it, to appreciate it, to just kind of like sit with all the things that you wanted to achieve out of this. And you let the painting settle so you can actually, sit with it and learn something from it. And so I suppose, in any particular busy week, if you're going really, if you're really flat out from Monday to Saturday, in that typical, Sunday might be the Sabbath for Christians anyway, in that mode, Sunday might be an opportunity to just sit back and kind of just have some perspective on the week that just was. And if you're just continually working because you've got deadlines, then you're not able to have that perspective. You're not able to come into the presence of all the activity that you've been doing and actually learn from it. It's almost like you need to, I suppose, that saying, don't miss the wood for the trees. The trees is kind of like all the endless busyness, all the things that are like you need to do, but don't miss the wood as well. Don't miss the big picture. And I think rest is a really important way to kind of let all of those things fall into place. And I'm sure you've had that experience where you aren't you maybe you might be daydreaming and you're just kind of like just out there. You're in that mode where you don't feel rushed, you don't feel harried, and suddenly all these connections that you didn't know you were doing in the background all fall into place, right? Now, I'm conscious that as I say this, it sounds like I'm offering you a productivity hack. Make sure you rest so you can come up with that brilliant idea. That might be an outcome of this particular thing, but it's not the reason we would do that in the first place. I think there's something deeply human about taking that time and space to just be, right? Rather than do, which is what we do the rest of the time. Yeah. And remember that human being is really what it's all about, right? Not human doing. And rest is one way to access that, and I think a really life-giving way.
It's interesting, and my family, we've been on this journey for the last sort of probably 3 or 4 years, a bit more, trying to say, what does this mean? And I think one of the biggest aspects for me was around this idea that said, when rest is even just a moment in time, it's sort of like, well, I'm achieving so I can get to rest. And then I'm resting so that I'm then prepared to keep going on achieving. And it still has this idea of, well, I just have to get this thing done so that I can take a next step. But it was actually a mental game to start saying, well, actually, if I can incorporate what rest means and just being, as you said, there's another way of perhaps using it, into who I am daily, into who I am weekly or more, it's actually one and the same here. Like rest and achievement is actually one life, rather than I'm just doing something to get to the rest, or I'm only doing the rest to get to the achievement. And there's a different aspect of looking at life in that way. It takes a retraining. I certainly don't have it down pat, but it's one of those ones where I think life is suddenly looked at differently. If you can join these and they're all one rather than they're just achieving to get to the other thing.
Yeah, that's right. I have heard, I thought this was quite a good tip as well, that if you're someone like me that works at a desk most days of the week, then maybe rest for you can look like activity, but activity where you're doing something more bodily, right? Like you might want to garden, or like a couple of weeks ago, I went with my family to do like a ropes course. And that was so wonderful because it was not something that I would normally do. And even though it wasn't restful in the just being kind of sense, it was enabling me to tap into other aspects of being human that I don't often get to like experience, especially if I'm at a desk most days. And so I think it's trying to work out, where does your life tell you maybe what aspects of being human are overemphasized in your normal week, and then how can your restful activity act as a counterpoint to that. Do you know what I mean? So maybe if you are someone who has to work with your hands or, like a lot of that during the week, maybe something like rest for you might be doing something that feeds your spirit, whatever that is. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a really interesting, kind of like building on what you're saying, trying to make it part of the whole. I suppose here the thing is, how do you become a whole human being, right? So 6 days of the week you're living out one particular way of being human. On that seventh day, you could try something else to just kind of balance the scales just that little bit more.
If someone's listening and saying, well, you guys are just talking a bit mumbo jumbo, how am I going to actually do this in my life? How am I going to get started? I sort of get the idea that, we're just sort of doing and doing and doing, and yeah, it sort of sounds nice to not be doing that. Is the first step just to maybe identify one thing to start on that might be different in that rest space, or is there other best ways, as you've been talking about this topic more, Justine, that says if someone wants to start to maybe say, I do want to change and not be addicted to achievement, the best thing to start with?
Yeah, I think, I don't know about you, Clayton, but I feel like my calendar runs my life, right? And I'm not only because I have a family, and so you almost need to think of every family member and all their activities that go into your calendar as well. And I think a really good place to start is just looking at your calendar and putting in your holidays, right? Planning in your holidays. And this is not something that comes naturally to me because I like to work, rest and holidays I don't really think about so much. But if you can be deliberate about scheduling in days that you're going to get a break, I think that, and then knowing as you kind of work that is coming, I think that's a really powerful thing to do. I've heard of this great practice where, something like, 1 day a week is a good place to start, but then also one week a year might be just like time that you take out, if it's possible, of course, not to go on holiday and be tired out from all your furious itinerary, but just to try and get that time and space away. And that feels really unachievable, really. I will say, but I think that something like that would be a really wonderful thing that if we could try and do. But in the absence of that, yeah, trying to schedule in your rest and the days that you don't have to work and don't have to toil to earn your existence, I'll prove the worth of your life. I think that would be really a valuable thing to do. Because let's remember, work is such that there's always more work to do, and that if you don't put the boundaries on work, it's going to take over your life,
Absolutely.
And so, and I said before as well, like, of course, the housing prices, all that sort of stuff means that we do have to toil. Maybe that might need to provoke a harder conversation, which is, do I need to adjust my expectations for what kind of what kind of house I want to live in, so that I am not completely maxed out trying to earn a living to pay this mortgage? That's a far harder question to kind of to contemplate. But yeah, I think as a first step, trying to work out where are those gaps, and kind of really being intentional about pushing them in there. Even if it feels like I can't fit anything in, it's like, well, you're going to have to just do it. Do it for your future self. Your future self will thank you.
I know one other thing that I've started doing with some of my friends is we're just having a conversation around this a little bit more often. We're allowed to talk into each other's world. So it's sort of this idea of, well, this is, often as well, how's your week been, whatever. So the opportunity now is, I think are you just being sucked into that achievement mentality? Like that, this is sort of the conversation, maybe not in those words, but this is certainly the opportunity we are allowing to each other to actually do that. So that might be a way too, to just talk to your friends, those who are close to the family. Hey, listen, I want to not be like this. And so as we talk about it, you have a right to just challenge me on that, or give me a rating out of 10. Where do you think I am right now? Okay, well, then let's talk 3 months from now and see where I am. I think there's those around us who love us. They want to help, right? But so often we're all sucked into this mentality quite often. So it's hard unless we give permission to each other. That's certainly something that I've found challenging as well, because my friends have certainly, called me out on that at various times too. And that's always a tough moment.
Yeah, I feel like maybe another way to frame it, if like some people might find that maybe a bit too vulnerable, right? To kind of invite people to criticize you. Maybe it's a friendly kind of conversation can also be something that says, what are you really missing right now? What do you really want? Like what would you really love to do with some time that you don't have, right? And so trying to work out the thing that we really want and then working out the things that stand in the way of that. And then I guess encouraging each other to take those steps towards what we really do want, right? Because then I suppose the idea here is that you work out what you love more and you allow the thing that you love more to kind of knock your achievement addiction off the throne of your life. I think, if we would like to be driven by a positive sense of what I really want versus what am I doing wrong, that might be a good conversation to have as well.
See, Justine, this is why you wrote the book and I didn't, because that is so much better way to achieve it. I achieved the lack of achievement addiction, which is quite ironic in that sense too. Justine, thank you so much for the wisdom, for the bravery in one sense to write a book like this as well in our world. And so we thank you so much for that. And thanks so much for joining us today.
I've been so delighted to talk with you. Thanks so much, Clayton.
Justine Toh, the author of the book Achievement Addiction, part of the Reconsidering series from the Centre for Public Christianity here on Towards Understanding.